And now?
Now I can hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect. I switched to headset. Yeah, so all right.
All right, so I just wanted to introduce Roman Dusik, right?
Yes, very well pronounced.
You graduated in 2013.
13.
Okay, from this program, and he's currently working at BNP Paribas, Marvel Stomping Ground. Where are you? Which floor are you on right now?
Fifth floor, but I'm in London.
Oh, you're in London. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get to that then. So why don't you start? And we're going to take some notes because they're all going to be graduating soon, and they want to know, how did you get your job? What was your process?
Yeah, sure. So it's been, I mean, long enough for me to remember. But yeah, as you said, in 2013. Also, probably I have to mention that my case was a little bit more specific, which related to sort of the scholarship I was on while I was at Lehigh. So I was on this very sort of special scholarship called Fulbright. So bottom line, I think it was funded by US government, but I couldn't really stay in the US after the program, so that partially affected what I could do or what I couldn't do. So therefore, essentially, at the time I was graduating, I had to be looking for a job elsewhere. I mean, not in the US, which was very unfortunate because I guess otherwise, I would have loved to stay and all that, but skipping all these details, my first job actually was, which I found, I think by accident, was with Morgan Stanley in a credit risk modeling. So I was in Budapest, so they opened essentially risk modeling center there. And I was one of the very first hires. I was pretty much about modeling building models that were about measuring numerous aspects of credit risk, predominantly things like probability of default for various obligor types, for various structures, and so on. Things like loss given default, essentially capital models, stress testing was a very big topic. That was also very interesting in the sense that there was very, I would say, rigorous in terms of how things were done. So it was, very statistically driven. A lot of things that I've been taught at school. I mean, especially in the classes like stochastic calculus, financial optimization, derivatives, programming. So that's why I felt I was very well equipped and prepared after Lehigh. So after a few years, I've been doing the job. And from Budapest, I moved to London, where I joined RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland. So I don't know, it's not as big in US as it used to be, but briefly, it was one of the largest banks in 2007 before it pretty much was bailed out and nationalized. So then it had to be rebuilt from scratch. I think pretty much it's still majority owned by UK government, but that was great because I said pretty much all the risk models in the bank that effectively failed had to be rebuilt from ground zero, and that doesn't happen often when you see that essentially when the entire framework has to be scrapped and all models and entire analytical function of the bank has to be built up. It was one of those rare opportunities. So actually, I joined the risk analytics and modeling function there, and more specifically, the stress testing team, stress testing model development. So that was also on the one hand about credit risk, but on the other hand, it was more about the macroprudential capital management and macroeconomic stress testing, either in-house sponsored or regulatory sponsored. So at American banks, you have a CCAR, which is pretty much administered by Fed to make sure that banks' capital position is sound before any capital intensive actions can be made, like dividends paid or shares. Share buybacks, and it's similar in Europe and in UK. The Bank of England essentially prescribe certain macroeconomic stress tests which the bank has to run, and then essentially you have hurdles which you have to pass. So the task here is that you have a bunch of models that measure numerous aspects of credit risk of your portfolio. So at a big bank you would naturally have a split of retail portfolios and wholesale portfolios, and then those models would be all, in this particular context, producing key measures of credit risk, and then the task is to link that with macroeconomic variables. Yes, please interrupt me whenever. Yeah.
Can you? I probably missed it, but how? So you're a Fulbright student. You went back to Budapest, right? Because that's
originally I'm from Ukraine, but it's also long story short. But I mean, I just basically there is. I mean, it's hard not to talk about it, but when it comes to European Union, it's quite sensitive in terms of your citizenship and all that. So with visas, you also had to be sort of mindful that, especially for the graduate positions, it wasn't easy. So basically, they couldn't sponsor me in London directly, so I had to come via Budapest. So that's partially the reason why I started out in Budapest.
Your first job was in London?
No, that was my second job after Budapest.
Oh, okay. So you never worked in the US. So you were in London. Okay, so you
that's right. For the last actually 5 years, I was in London. Pretty much.
How did you get that job in London? Did you interview for it? I mean, have you interviewed?
Actually, so after Morgan Stanley, I mean, I just said I wanted to come to London, and then I've come across, and essentially I said that at Morgan Stanley there was very also sort of unique setup where you've been given enormous responsibilities early on in terms of the getting on this model development cycle, where you get to develop model from A to Z, from prototype to production. Normally at big banks, it's very stringent and regimented. You get to work on specific piece, whether it's prototyping or execution or even some could be even sub part of some specific methodology, because models can be so huge. But in that regard, I felt I was extremely lucky because I had a chance to work on numerous projects of fairly high importance and huge capital impact, because also how the importance of the models are measured, it's pretty much how much capital do they cover. If you've got a portfolio of a few billions, and then you're building a model that would fundamentally change the capital requirements the bank has to put aside for that portfolio, that's very notable, essentially. So that was the case, as I said, essentially, that had a chance to work. Go ahead, please. I mean,
but so you were working at Morgan Stanley in
Budapest.
London?
In Budapest. Yeah.
Internal transfer, basically, from there to London.
No, so there was internal transfer would have worked, but it didn't actually work out. So that's why I had to find job in the street. So after Morgan Stanley, I joined RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, and it was the first job in London.
But how did you get that job in RBS in London?
Normally just applied, and actually that was That's a rare case when I simply applied and had 5 or 6 interviews, which were all technical because the team I said was it's a technical team that does the model development. So that's why, and at a junior level, you are really expected to know the technical stuff. Meaning that as more senior you get, as more progress, you have to be rather than balanced in terms of the soft skills, how you manage stakeholders, all that. But at the junior levels, I mean, because you don't have as much of experience as someone more senior, that's why you expect it to be very technically solid, and when it comes to risk modeling, you have to know all the methodology, statistics, essentially the how to program that in R, MATLAB, SAS, Python. So that was very much the case. But I said because at Morgan Stanley I had very wide exposure to numerous businesses, so I had to chance to work on very complex models for very structured products, measuring the loss given default, probability of defaults for complex portfolios of hedge funds, which is statistically very challenging problem because you have very few defaults ever happening. So just somehow because of that exposure, you get to you get to work on various methodologies, to get to.
What are some of the courses that helped you the most? The course that you take here, what are the courses that really helped you the most?
I would say it's 3 that I can think of for sure. One was stochastic calculus, which was a year-long class. I mean, you can't do without it. It's everything pretty much you come across models which are built on foundations which are stochastic in its nature. The other one was financial optimization. So just essentially was very helpful in a way of developing mindset, how you can look at financial problems from operational research point of view. That pretty much a lot of the problems you have to deal with, it's an optimization issue. So how to set up how to translate the issue into the optimization issue, and how to go about solving it. So I think that was very helpful. And the third one, actually, at the time I didn't think it would be so big, but that was econometrics, because at the end of the day, the majority of the stuff you do in risk management, it's statistics and econometrics. So especially in my previous job at RBS, that I said, where I was building macroeconomic models for macroeconomic stress testing, I was 90% econometrics driven, where you had to sort of identify historical relationships between various risk factors and macroeconomic variables, and try to extrapolate that into future. Yes.
Great. Let's see if anyone has any questions to ask you pertaining to.
Maybe yes, we'll get that in a second. Just last thing that after RBS, actually I moved to BNP, and that's where I'm currently in, and I'm doing slightly different things. So now I'm not in a 100% quantitative modeling job, and it's very quantitative. It's not just a pure development job. It's more on the analytic side of things, where you have already models and you have to use them and explain what's going on, which is different to the previous two, where I had to build them. So that's I wanted to emphasize this, and it's also in the context of counterparty risk of over-the-counter derivatives. But yes, please.
How did you move from RBC to BNP?
That's a good question. Well, I just knew some people who then connected me to recruiter who put me in for this, because at some point it becomes challenging in the sense that I already had 5 or 6 years of experience in credit risk modeling, but I wanted to slightly move away from that and diversify in terms of area of expertise and knowledge and skills. And risk is a huge area, so I wanted to try something else. So, and that becomes challenging, after longer you longer you spend in one particular aspect of risk, because you do develop your expertise, but then also it gets more specialized and niche. So I had this sort of aspiration to try out new areas of risk. So basically, and then eventually I've come across this counterparty risk function, which deals with the portfolio analytics of various derivative exposures. And then the interesting part of this, of the type of the role like this, is that it's very comprehensive, because it deals with the cross-asset derivatives, with the capital, with market risk, with liquidity risk. So one can't be expert in all of those areas. So that's why when someone comes from a background where he or she had to work with numerous aspects of risk, it's normally a big advantage, because you already have this mindset of being well equipped and well minded and well versed in sort of transversal areas of risk management. So that was pretty much the case. Yes.
Let's see if anyone has any questions to ask him. Kabuki has a question.
Hi, Roman. Nice to meet you. So my question is, you mentioned that how you got the job at RBS, right? Was you just applied for it and had 5 or 6 interviews, right? So my question is, when at the end of the interview, when the interviewer asks you wants you to ask them some questions. So I find it difficult to ask some smart questions. So do you have any ideas on that?
I got it. I have a very good suggestions for this question. Always ask them, tell me what was your best day at this company. Normally people love it, and that's a good icebreaker. Also to ask someone. So always ends on a good note if you ask this question.
What was the best day at the company? That's interesting. I'm going to talk about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Any other question? Aman, you have any question?
I would ask.
Yes. There was a question.
When you work on the model, you spoke a lot about the models that you work on.
Can you hear him?
Yes, I can.
I'm assuming that most of this work is done on Python, or do you work on, is it MATLAB based? And also when you said you work on pieces of project, that kind of disheartened me also, knowing that in the big banks, you probably, that's how they need this process, right? So one person leaves, the whole project can't fall apart. They need to have people replace you, so they want this to be very structured. So you become very much ingrained in the culture of, when you take from one department, you do something, you pass on, you just keep doing the same thing. And so in our careers, if we really want to avoid that kind of work, what kind of financial institutions should we work for, where we can actually be involved in the project we need to end, and have the baby intact? So.
Not sure I got the second part of the question. First one, I'm clear, but could you just rephrase? So you basically were asking about the culture of of owning the project and sort of integrating the smaller pieces in a wider sort of fabric of methodologies and libraries, or just if you could elaborate more on the second question here.
When you were explaining the work that you were doing at, I think it was Morgan, you were saying that that the bank will give you a very specific role on what your contract will be, and that's why you don't do anything before, you do anything after. You don't know how it was done before. Maybe you have some say. You don't see what's done with it after. And exactly like you, I feel like that's what's quite disheartening. It kind of takes a lot of the fun out of it. And so I was wondering, but once you graduate, if you want to avoid becoming like a cog in the chain very sort of system, and you want to create a model, you want to work in a team together, that kind of atmosphere, create a model together, and what kind of institutions do that kind of work? Because some of the banks do it the way you said.
Okay, let's get to the first part of the question, because you asked whether it was in the modeling was in Python or anything else. Actually, it's the short answer. The choice of language is very specific to, could be not even the function to the team. So normally how it works that you have someone who's been already doing something in R or MATLAB, and then that's one. And second is it also depends on whether the particular language can translate into the production quality, production grade of quality of the code, meaning that if you prototype something, whether it can be patched into the sort of industrial systems that would be running that model for million of trades or million of customers. So what it means essentially is that people do all possible things, all sorts of things in different languages. So I already worked in a first job, it was MATLAB and R. Then it was very heavy on SAS, which is like this old school statistical environment. And now it's split between Python and R. But one thing for sure is that if you know R and Python, you should be covered for pretty much anything, and more actually on Python side these days, I guess, because R is very good for statistical stuff. So the libraries you can find for R unmatched, unbeatable. There's vibrant community of new packages and all that. So from that point of view, I mean, if you're doing statistical modeling, hardcore econometrics, R is definitely a language of choice. But when it comes to more, I would say, complex projects where you have to manage, the data flows, then maybe you have a reporting part where you want to build some nice dashboard. You have a lot of also dependencies. So of course, Python comes in as a very solid choice. But so that was the first part of the question. The second question, to be honest, correct me along the way, because I'm not sure I 100% got your idea. But so from what I understood, you essentially were asking essentially how do you make yourself useful early on in a big bank? That does it summarize the question?
Yeah. What I was wondering was, how do you make sure that you're working on the project end to end and you don't just get stuck with that one specific thing?
Yeah. It's a good question, because but the simple answer, no one will give you on the day one something big to work on, because essentially you have to prove yourself. So you start off something very simple, something very easy, and if you can be trusted with that, then progressively people will start giving you more complex projects, more complex models, and so on. But so that's why the idea is very simple, that you can't mess the basics. So if someone gives you linear regression to run, so you have to spot all the issues right away. You have to tell people what's wrong, all that. So so I think that's the idea. And then and you take it from there, so you always continue learning new methodologies. You keep proposing that essentially always one or two alternative methodologies can be applied in the particular context, and and people like that when you're not content with the status quo, and you always have a critical eye on what's already implemented, so the statistics, statistical implications of all that. But once again, you have to be easy with what's already there, and especially at the very beginning, you should be always sort of understanding the dynamics that very complex models might have been built by many people over years, and then if you don't and you come on a day one, so you can't change it overnight, but progressively as you essentially more you prove yourself, more responsibility you gain, and essentially the more leeway and opportunities to implement your ideas and sort of and influence the whole process you have. So I think that would be my view on that.
Roman, unless there's any more questions, I just wanted to thank you very much for your time. Don't want to take
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Patrick, yeah, just feel free to share my email with students. So, you know, if anyone wants to reach out or have some specific or even technical questions about some projects you guys working on, or if you're ever looking for a job in London, that's true. I could help.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure. Bye-bye.